Hey Camellia, I wanted to take just a few minutes this evening and update you guys on the state of our church and COVID. It has been a whirlwind of a week, and it's only Tuesday. It's been one of those weeks. As some of you may know, Blake and Courtney found out yesterday that they will be entering into quarantine for a little while. And then today, both me and Paul found out that we have tested positive for COVID. Now, both of us are doing fine. Our families are doing fine. For me, it's nothing more than just your seasonal head cold, got some drainage, sore throat. Nothing more than that. We're doing fine. But with Blake and Courtney, me, Paul and Janet, that means that Camellia's entire staff is currently in quarantine and will be so for the next 10 to 14 days, which of course includes this upcoming Sunday. In addition to this, at Camellia, we have a handful of other people within the life of our church who have also tested positive. And I know that there are a number of you out there who know that, who are aware that now we probably have 9 or 10 of our church members who are regular attenders who have tested positive. And I know that there's a lot of people out there who are uneasy about this. For many, this may come as a surprise, especially odd for the entire staff to come down with it at the same time. But for me, this isn't a surprise. For me, I don't find this odd at all. We as the church must never expect life to come easy for us. We must never expect trials and difficulties to never come our way. Jesus said, in this world, there will be trouble. We know that coming in. Peter said in 1 Peter chapter 4, for us to not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon us to test us, as though something strange were happening to us. Ever since I've been at Camellia, I know that I haven't talked about COVID a lot, but when I have expressed all along that we need to be ready. COVID will hit. People in our church will test positive for this. And not only that, at some point or another, there will be a contagious person who is in our midst at one of our gatherings. It's going to happen. I expected it. I knew it would happen. To be honest, I assumed and kind of knew at some point I would come down with it. It was going to happen, and it has happened. But listen, that's okay. This isn't a problem for me. This isn't a problem for Christians. It's not a problem for Camellia. We as Christians, we live in a broken world, and COVID is evidence of that. When Adam and Eve first sinned, all the way back in Genesis 3, a curse came upon the world. The world was now broken, and the world was not as it should be, and COVID is a symptom of this. It's a reminder of the brokenness of this world for we Christians. And what I want to make clear is that though cases might be on the rise at Camellia, it is not time for Camellia to pull back the reins of what we have gotten back to doing. The broken world that produced COVID, it's not pulling back its reins. It's not letting up in regards to what it's doing to the world. Therefore, the church must not pull back. Therefore, the church must not let up either. In the midst of brokenness, the world needs Christ more than ever. Christ is the answer, and the church is the one who holds the answer. We are the ones that God has designed to get that answer to the world. And so the church must not pull back. We must not, in fear, pull back from what we are doing, but rather we must go forth harder and more fervent and with greater urgency than ever before. So I want to tell you today, your staff will not be at church Sunday because we'll be under quarantine, but Camellia will stand strong, okay? We will be fine, and Camellia will persevere, okay? In light of that, some things are going to be different. And here's the plan for this upcoming Sunday, and at least until your staff come back. Brother Rick Marshall has been such a blessing to this church over the years, over these last few years of not having a pastor. And he means a lot to our church, and the church means a lot to him. And I'm grateful for him filling in for me this last Wednesday while we were on vacation. And Brother Rick has committed to filling in for me until I can return from my quarantine. And I'm grateful for Brother Rick And without question, he joyfully and gladly was willing to do that. In regards to music, for Paul, the praise team will be leading music. Even without Paul being there, the praise team has been doing this for a long time. There's some very talented and gifted people that the Lord has blessed Camellia with. And Paul will continue to plan the service and put in his work, and we will entrust those that God has gifted to serve in his stead. One thing that we unfortunately are going to have to change is the hanging of the greens was scheduled for this Sunday. In light of the fact that none of our staff will be there, we have decided to forego the hanging of the green service, even though we know that it is a special service within the life of the church. But Tracy and her decorating team have already committed to going beforehand and having our church decorated to help us celebrate Christmas before this Sunday begins. So the church will be decorated for Christmas. The praise team will be leading in Christmas music. Brother Rick will be there to bring the word to the church. Blake and Courtney have already set up everything for youth so that youth can still meet in their absence as well. Some other things that we ask for this Sunday, and these are things that should always be the case anyways, but that we just want to reiterate, is that if you have symptoms, please stay at home, especially in light of the fact that we do have higher numbers than normal that are positive. We want to make sure that it's not spreading. Listen, we don't think that it has spread at church. Yes, there are people in our church who have COVID, but we do not believe that COVID has been passed from one person to another at church. It is just coincidence that these people have it. They can't be traced back to one another based on the ones who have had it, maybe outside of me and Paul. And so we don't think that church is a place of spread, and we want to keep it that way. And so if you have symptoms, we do ask you that you stay at home. Our media team has been working diligently over this last month to get our live stream up and going. So now we have greater opportunity than ever to where you can stay home and continue to worship. For those of you who do come, and listen, I encourage you to come. God didn't call us to live in fear. Okay, if you don't have symptoms, you come, you show up. But if you do, I really encourage you to wear a mask. You young adults and youth, I know that you're not at as great of a risk. I know there's question. I admit it, there's question in regards to how effective masks can be. But here's one thing that I know, is that you young people, by you wearing a mask, you will help our older ones to feel more comfortable and be able to help them to worship the Lord more freely. And so that's something I ask of you youth, you young adults. Maybe you've never worn a mask to church. Maybe you don't wear a mask when you go shopping. To show love to our older people, this is from your pastor to you. I ask that you do wear a mask this Sunday. Just a reminder, in our sanctuary, the 4 sections that we have, the 2 outer sections still have the ropes between every other pew. The inner sections don't. For our younger ones, for those who are not in as much risk, for those who may not be as fearful, we ask that you sit on those middle 2 sections and leave the outer 2 sections for older ones, for more at-risk people, for those who may be more concerned. Let's leave those 2 outer sections to those who need to spread out. And for you younger ones, those who aren't as concerned, those who are not at as much risk, sit on the inside pews as well. Also, for those who may not be comfortable in the sanctuary, but you still want to be around your church family, remember the Clayton Shaw building is available there as well. You are more spread out. Masks are required there at the Clayton Shaw. And you can still go be around other people's presence. Thus far, I think we've had between 5 to 10 there each Sunday, so a much smaller number, more spread out, masks required. That's always an option as well. I want to leave you with this, just to help you. I know a lot of people are getting fearful, getting antsy. I want to encourage you of a few things during this time, just some scriptures to set your mind on. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7 tells us something very important for we believers. 2 Timothy 1:7 says this, "For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but a spirit of power and love and self-control. Fear never characterizes the life of a Christian. Even in the midst of a pandemic, fear does not characterize the life of a Christian. Trust in the Lord characterizes the life of a Christian. Love for others and a desire to get the gospel out to those who need it. A desire to get the answer out to a broken world and to people living in a broken world and affected by a broken world. That's the driving desire of a Christian. Self-preservation is not at the heart of Christianity. Boldness and courage and a heart for the gospel characterizes the Christian. And it needs to characterize we at Camellia as well. We should not be making decisions out of fear. We should not be living in fear. We should not let fear of this disease begin to divide the congregation to where some people are upset about decisions that some make, to where we begin to view others as foolish because they wear a mask, or others as foolish because they don't wear a mask, because you are more concerned, because you're not concerned. Fear does not need to divide, because fear should never be a part of us anyways. A driving desire to get the answer of Jesus to a broken world and to people who live in that broken world drives what we do, not fear. Isaiah 26:3 says this, "You keep him in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on you because he trusts in you." Okay? And so much of this is set on our mind. What are we setting our minds on? Okay? Are we setting our mind on a narrative driven by the media, who most of us agree the media is not giving a good narrative, and yet for some reason we buy into the narrative of COVID, even though we reject most of the other narratives that the media gives, okay? And so we're not setting our mind on what the media is giving us. We're not setting our mind on a fear of the future of what could happen if something possibly happens. We're setting our minds on truth, okay? In fact, Philippians 4 tells us this in regards to dealing with fear and instead living with peace and contentment. Philippians 4, beginning in verses 6 and 7. Many of you know verses 6 and 7. Do not be anxious about anything, even a pandemic. Don't be anxious about this pandemic. Don't be anxious about your pastor coming down with COVID. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. So if you want the peace of God, don't set your mind on possible future circumstances. Rather, set your mind on God. That's Isaiah 26:3. You keep him in perfect peace. Who does he keep in perfect peace? The one whose mind is stayed on God because he trusts in God. But he doesn't just stop there. Listen to verses 8 and 9. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things. What you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. So a part of having the peace of God is not just praying and trusting God, but is setting our mind on truth. And I want to share with you some statistics that's not distorted in any ways. I mean, these are statistics. These are facts. You can take them how you want, but I'm going to share with you truth about COVID, okay? The survival rates right now for COVID for those who are infected, and again, those who are infected right now is a very extremely small number of those in the United States, even in Alabama, even in Prattville. It's a very small number of those who have been infected and are being infected. But those who are 19 and younger, for those who are infected, you have a 99.997% survival rate. For those 20 to 49, you have a 99.98% survival rate. For those 50 to 69, you have a 99.95% survival rate. So for those younger than 70, okay, if you get it, you have a greater than 99.9% chance of surviving, okay? There's a greater probability of you dying in a car wreck than of COVID. Now, for those 70 and over, I understand the statistics do change. There's only a 94.6% survival rate, but still you're looking at that. 95 out of 100 will survive again, I acknowledge, I admit, that's a much different number than those under 70. But it's not the guaranteed death that oftentimes the media portrays to us. Also, numbers that were just updated on the 21st. The total deaths involving COVID. Now, this is not deaths because of COVID, but these are people who have died with COVID regardless of the reason of the death. As of the 21st of November, there have been 238,337 deaths involving COVID. In the same time period, deaths involving flu and pneumonia have been 138,222. The difference in that is 138,000. The difference in that, I should say, is 100,000. There's not much change in those two numbers. 138,000 pneumonia and flu deaths is a lot. It's not as much as those involving COVID, but it's still a lot. Now, here's the thing. Why are we not scared of the flu and pneumonia the way that we're scared of COVID? There's still an extraordinarily large number of flu and pneumonia deaths, 138,000. Only 238,000 of those involving COVID, okay? So both very high numbers, yet COVID is what we're petrified of because that's been ingrained in us by the media, okay? I'm not saying that COVID is not something to be concerned about. I'm not saying that people can die of COVID. I acknowledge that, but I'm also acknowledging people die of flu, people die of pneumonia. Here's the greater point I'm making. We live in a broken world. People die daily. People get diseases. They die daily. The older generations, those who are more sick, they're more prone to dying of any illness, okay? And so, again, hear me out. I'm not making light of this. For anybody who has a family member who has died, for anybody who has it and has gotten very sick, I acknowledge it's out there, but I also acknowledge at the same time there are other sicknesses, there are other diseases that are dangerous, and we as Christians continue to persevere even in the midst of all of those. In fact, I'm going to turn to Philippians chapter 1. Again, in light of setting our mind on God, in light of setting our mind on things that are true, Paul, in the book of Philippians, was facing the possibility, in fact, I would even say the probability of death. This is what Paul said in chapter 1, beginning in verse 19. He says, "For I know that through your prayers and the help of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, this will turn out for my deliverance. As it is my eager expectation and hope that I will not be at all ashamed, but that with full courage now as always, Christ will be honored in my body, whether by life or by death." Now listen to what he says in verse 21. "For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. If I am to live in the flesh, that means fruitful labor for me. Yet which shall I choose? I cannot tell. I am hard pressed between the two. My desire is to depart and be with Christ, for that is far better, but to remain in the flesh is more necessary on your account." Paul was facing a probability of death, yet Paul was not scared. Paul said, if I face death, I want to face death in the way that magnifies Christ. And in fact, even if I do die, that's okay because death brings about something better for me than life does. And now listen, I'm not saying that all of us should be looking forward to dying. I've got a wife and a family. I don't want to, but here's the thing, I'm not scared of it. And that should be the response of Christians. Out of all the people in the world who are scared of COVID, Christians should be the least fearful because we have the testimony of Paul. Whether I live, whether I die, it's okay. If I live, it is a life lived for Christ. If I die, then I have gained the glories of heaven. And that's okay. And so whatever our response is, just like Paul, I want to magnify Christ with my body. Why do I bring this up to you guys, Camellia? I bring it up to you for a reason, is because I don't want our response to this to be fear, okay? We need to let the world know that we have the one who has the answer to COVID. that we have the one who gives us a gift that is greater than physical health in this life. We have the one who holds the answers to true satisfaction, to true refuge, to a true portion. The guarantee that a COVID vaccine can bring, the guarantee that even if somebody could promise us that we will never get COVID, can never bring the satisfaction and the joy and freedom of knowing that you have salvation. So Camellia, live in that freedom. Camellia, base decisions on that freedom. I'm not saying be unwise, be smart. Let's love our neighbors and how we be wise. Let's seek to keep each other safe, but let us never live in fear. Let us operate out of trust in God. And so that's what we're going to do as Camellia. We're not shutting down because people need the answer, okay? We may have to tweak and change some things, but listen, come to Camellia. Hear the word of God preached. Worship with your brothers and sisters. Let's proclaim to the world that we have the answer to COVID. Let's proclaim to the world that we don't have to be scared because we have Jesus Christ who has overcome death. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? For those of you who it truly would be unwise for you to come, for those of you with symptoms, for those of you who are sick, worship at home on live stream. For those of you who can't make it, worship at home for live stream. This is why we have it. We have it for you. I encourage you to be there, but if not, listen, it's okay. It's a matter of conscience. It's okay. You worship with us in spirit and in heart there via live stream. Listen, I love you guys. I look forward to being back in your presence. I trust Brother Rick will handle the Word of God well as he has done thus far. I trust that you'll be faithful. God bless you. I love you guys.